what is terror or terrorism? I mean, it's always been hotly debated. It's never seemed to me that it's quite as complicated as people often make it. I mean, it's asymmetrical violence done by committed by non-state actors, where you target civilians, and the goal is to inflict not necessarily large-scale violence, but enough violence to have the fear that it generates in the media and it reverberates in the media be far out of proportion to the actual amount of violence that occurs. So that, what happened in Times Square is a perfect example. Nothing happened, thank God. But even if that makeshift bomb had gone off, at best it would have caused a relatively small amount of damage, maybe killed a few people, blown out a lot of windows. But more people die in car accidents, probably, and more people die in bicycle accidents on a given weekend in New York than would have been killed by such an attack. But the fear it generates is enormous. I mean, just the possibility of the attack that might have occurred has had enormous effect on America and New York and our sense of ourselves, and whether we can feel safe. And and no one died.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, caller, you're on the air. What's up?
Okay. This is the first time I'm watching your show, though, but the topic is very intriguing to me. What I'm saying is that these so-called terrorists aren't acting in a vacuum. They're not acting on their own. And Americans need to be willing to accept the very uncomfortable truths regarding terrorism. Primarily that these terrorists, these so-called terrorists, are merely puppets. Okay, and their puppet masters, whether we are willing to accept it or not, are the CIA, they are the Mossad, they are British intelligence, MI6. Okay, in any crime, once a crime is committed, you have to act as a detective, essentially. When a detective is investigating a crime, he starts with the premise of who benefits from the crime, and then he works backwards and takes a look at who had the motive and the opportunity. Okay, now when a so-called terrorist commits an action that harms American citizens or foreign citizens, who benefits? Not those supposed terrorists, not the governments from which they come, from which they are citizens of. It is Western governments, and it is Israel. It is very uncomfortable for people to hear this, but it is an absolute fact. And Bin Laden himself is dead. If you really stop and think, and frankly, Americans seem to be really loath to do any hard-hitting investigation. They rely on, their local TV anchor person to feed them information as opposed to going out and doing some hard-hitting research. And the Internet is a fantastic resource. We know there's a lot of nonsense, a lot of lies there, but there's a lot of truth there as well. And
sir,
people have to be willing to study history.
Sir, let me ask you something. How do we get ahead of the curve? That's the topic tonight.
Okay. How do we get ahead of it? First of all, we need to stop being afraid. We need to stop looking over our shoulder and thinking that some boogeyman is going to blow us up in the middle of Times Square. If you take a hard look at that situation as well as the so-called crotch bomber situation, it's clear that those were manufactured events. So let's stop being afraid and let's start asking the uncomfortable questions.
Well, let me ask Chuck that. Do you believe those were manufactured situations, Chuck? Because you're an expert on the Center of Terror at John Jay College. You kind of have more feelers out there than the rest of us.
No, they're not manufactured. No, we have to distinguish. It's a real threat we face in the world, and the Al Qaeda has metastasized and become a mass movement in the world. It's a global movement. It's no longer sort of a hierarchy based in Afghanistan, but it spontaneously generated. It's called leaderless jihad, as one person has put it. And it's a real threat, and there are a lot of people who are genuinely trying to destroy us. And I think that like Faisal Fazad, who was recruited, he could be one of many people in the future. At the same time, we need to not panic, and I think trust that actually the police and intelligence units in the NYPD are actually doing a very good job. Most importantly is we're moving away from fighting wars against evil to deal with the real threat in the world. And I think it's a process that's going to take 5 or 10 years before we can much more effectively rely on local institutions. And that's what needs to happen, and it is happening. So I'm actually fairly optimistic that we can get on top of this. And we have to remember as a public that the fear, because of mass media, the fear gets intensified and exaggerated and repeated on and on and on. But, remember that tens of thousands of people die from automobile accidents every year. We need to put the danger in some kind of perspective.
All right. Well, Chuck, listen, we really appreciate you sticking with us. And thank you very much. Okay, Chuck?
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Great. Take care.
Bye. You
Bye.
too.